Okay. Tim Horst. Jim Stewart here.
Mr. Shirk?
Yes.
Hi, this is Gail, the recorder. I'll take roll if that's okay with you.
Okay.
It's not something that we're really.
Okay, so Tim Horst, I understand, is running late.
Yeah.
Jim Shirk?
Yes.
Danny Collins?
Yes, I'm online.
Christopher Fellerhoff?
Here.
Abigail Flores?
Here.
Vanna Vidal?
I'm here.
Nolianda James? Is Nolianda there? No. Nicole Sutton? Elaine Watson?
Here.
John Marsh? Kelly Fearon?
Here online.
Carla Price? Jamie Morris? Robin Baker? I believe she's excused tonight. Danielle Rodriguez?
Here.
Jason Jackman?
Here virtually.
Jonathan Forbes?
Present.
Peter Davitt?
Here.
David Aylesworth?
Here,
Are you in person or virtual?
virtual.
Thank you. John Kubicki, I believe, is also excused. Faye Miller?
Virtual.
Victoria Klug? Martin Santiago, aka Mike Disco?
Here virtually.
Sally Thompson?
Here.
David Solidi?
Here.
And let's see, by my count, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in person.
Ms. James, James just came in. I don't know if her mic's on or not.
Hello,
Okay, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry, who is it that just came in?
Nolianda James.
Thank you. All right, then we do have an in-person quorum. Vice Chair, would you please call for a vote of consent for remote participation?
Okay. Call for motion to allow remote participation.
So moved.
Second.
Ellen Watson moved. Second.
Second.
Ms. James seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign.
Nay.
What?
Remote participation is authorized. We have 3 minutes for public comment per person. Nothing like a rainstorm to suppress comments. Next, approval of the minutes.
Motion to approve minutes, Jonathan Forbes. Motion to approve the minutes.
Mr. Forbes moved to approve the minutes.
Second.
Ms. Flores, Sally Thompson seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Action items. Wade Reynolds.
I believe Johnny is going first. Oh, no, I'm going first.
All right. Good evening, BPAC. Wade Reynolds, Hillsborough TPO staff. I also have Chris Keller here with Banesh, the lead consultant on this project. This is the Hillsborough County Bicycle Network Plan. So, brief overview. This was a collaboration between the TPO and the county. Ms. Flores was involved with this as well, and we evaluated the existing bicycle network. The goal was to establish a data-driven approach to prioritize segments and demonstrate project development through conceptual plans. Again, creating a repeatable process that we could prioritize those candidate locations for improvements to both existing facilities and new bicycle facilities. So phase one was a data analysis and prioritization methodology. I'll get into these a little bit more, but basically we had risk factors, exposure factors, and network factors that we went through on this. The risk factors included crash history, so bicycle and pedestrian crashes along the segments, the posted speed limits, the average annual daily traffic, so the volume of traffic, the total number of lanes on the segment, and whether or not lighting was present. The exposure factors were the presence of activity generators, so that would be a park, a school, government services, a cultural facility, or zoning category of commercial general or commercial intensive. The residential density, so the existing residential density population per acre. The proximity to bus stops, so whether the segment's proximity and the number of miles from a transit stop. And an equity and social justice component, meaning it is within or directly adjacent to an underserved community. So that scoring is based on the equity factor scoring for each census block group. And then the network factor, so whether or not an existing bicycle facility is present, whether there is an existing sidewalk present, and the segment's distance from an existing or planned bicycle facility. The context classification was also used, so and that is the county's context classification of those roadway segments. So then we scored the segments and applied a weighting factor to the networks, because basically, if you look back, one adds up to 25 points and the other two add up to 20 points. So we normalized those factors. So once we had gone through all of that, we ended up with it divided into 4 categories, quartiles: low, moderate, high, and very high. The red in this case are the very high segments, and I believe all 4 of the segments we chose for further discussion were in the very high category, although one of them may have just been in the high category. But you can also see how many of these segments align with what you would think of as the urbanized area. The green segments, most of which you see there, are in the rural or more rural areas of the county. So as we went through the corridor selection to identify 4 corridors for further study, we tried to look at a geographic diversity and then also, of course, high scoring priorities. So those selected corridors are Waters Avenue, a segment which is between the Veterans and Sheldon Road, Causeway and / Lumsden, which is from Falkenberg to the Brandon Parkway, Shell Point Road in South County from US 41 to 24th Street Northeast, and Balm Riverview Road from Boyot Road to McMullen. So then those concept developments for each selected corridors, we reviewed the existing conditions, identified potential improvements, and developed those concepts. Starting with Waters Avenue, this is a 6 to 7 lane facility. It handles a lot of traffic, about 55,000 vehicles per day. It is home to 2 transit routes, and there are not any current mid-block crossings. There are bicycle facilities, particularly on the eastern side of this, a conventional 5-foot, give or take, bike lane, and then there are sharrows as you approach Sheldon Road. So we broke each of the list of improvements down into Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 improvements. These are based on the cost of these type of improvements, and use the county's tier system to describe those. Just one thing to point out in here, in all of these, you will see lighting as a Tier 3 improvement. It's pretty expensive. Signalization and mid-block crossings tend to be Tier 2, and Tier 1 tends to be signage, paint, pavement markings, things of that nature. So the existing roadway section for most of the corridor, as you can see with the bike lane here. And then the proposed, you'll see what you see here is those lanes being narrowed to accommodate a buffered bike lane in this portion of the facility. I also included, just for your review, these are what the plan sheets look like. I just grabbed one for each of the roadways rather than going through the entire segment that was studied. But you can see here examples of mid-block crossings and improved crossings at the intersections where those take place. You also have a little bit of median narrowing is what I'm trying to say in this as well to accommodate the facility. Moving on to Causeway Boulevard / Lumsden Road. This is still a pretty heavily traveled roadway, almost 30,000 vehicles per day. The speed limit is 45 miles an hour, and the total lanes vary from 6 to 10. I think that's 6 through lanes, 3 in each direction. This facility also crosses I-75, and there is not a local roadway crossing for a good distance on either side of it. So it becomes a pretty important facility for thinking about how to cross I-75. It's also home to 2 transit routes, the Route 25LX and the 360LX. So in this case, we again have the pavement markings, signage, and signal timing in the Tier 1, but we also have options for shared use paths or and propose possibly a separate bridge for a pedestrian crossing, bicycle pedestrian crossing, or installing a pathway and reconfiguring the roadway to have continuous pathways along either side of the shoulders of this roadway. Again, lighting in Tier 3 and the more expensive segments of shared use path in Tier 3 on this one. So the existing facility right now, and then the proposed showing shared use paths on both sides and the potential option of marking the shoulders for on-street bike lanes there. Also conducting a speed study on this facility. It is a pretty high marked speed limit, posted speed limit, but the actual speed is significantly higher. So again, just looking at what the actual conceptual plans themselves look like, you can see the crossings and shared use path in this portion of the facility. Moving on to Shell Point Road. Shell Point Road is one, just as by way of introduction, that I really like because it connects on the east end of it to the South Coast Greenway at the community college there. We have, this table is incorrect here. I believe it's the same table from something else. The speed limits, yeah, this is the table from something else. Anyway, it's a 2-lane road, but it does have a pretty high rate of speed on it and incomplete pedestrian and bike facilities. But along the eastern portion of it, there is an existing shared use path that this would connect to. So again, we're proposing lighting, completing the sidewalks, a couple of mid-block crossings, as well as continuing that shared use path all the way to 41. So again, this is the existing section. You can see a sidewalk on one side, generally a drainage facility on the other, although there are some portions of sidewalk along the south side in places. And then that change to a shared use path and the option of adding a sidewalk on the south side as well. As well as conducting a speed study to look at ways where we might lower the speed of that facility. This segment here at the bottom of these two actually shows where it connects to the existing shared use path, just west of the community college. Switching over to Balm Riverview Road, that is Boyette to McMullen. We do have existing sidewalks on both sides of this roadway. AADT about 17,000, which is pretty high for a 2-lane facility. Typically, you start getting to 1-to-1 capacity at about 20,000, I believe. I'd have to look back at my general engineering tables. I'm sure somebody has a better answer for that than I do. But the speed limit varies from 45 miles per hour through most of the segment to 20 through the school zone and 30 where it goes through some curves. So looking at this one, additional options for school zone safety, repair of areas of the sidewalk, landscaping improvements with shade trees where feasible, and a shared use path on one side instead of basically doubling the width of the sidewalk or a little wider where it allows. Access management in tier 3, modifying some driveways to decrease turning radii as people come onto this facility. And then one proposed raised crosswalk that is a tier 3 at Shady Lane, there it is, as well as lighting. So existing facility, sidewalks on both sides, no bicycle facility. Going to propose with a shared use path on one side and the existing sidewalk on the other. And just some of these pictures to help, or some of these plan sheets rather, to help show you what is proposed on this facility. And then the next steps for implementation, obviously, starting at the hardest part, identifying funding, but design, we're basically taking this into a design process for these or any other corridors would be the next step. Developing as part of that more formalized cost estimates and then public engagement, presumably once we're a little further into that. But again, this is all conceptual at this point. These are not funded projects, and we were trying to look at ones where we had not done any conceptual planning on these in the past. So with that, if you have any questions or comments for me or Chris, we'd be happy to try and answer them. And we are asking for your support and recommendations to the board on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Wade. Like you said, if anyone has any questions or comments.
Is this stuff included in the tip this year, or is this something looking towards next year, getting it into tip?
Next year or further out. Typically, if we were going to look at adding any of these projects, we'd be adding to sort of the 5th year of the tip. So, you know, we'd be probably, as any new projects were added, it'd be sort of designed in most likely the outer years, unless some new money was available to move things forward.
Just scanning through it, most of the 4 projects you have up there showed cost estimates for each project of each tier, except for the Balm Boyette with Balm Riverview 1. Didn't show any cost estimates for like the shared use path broken out. Showed a total there.
You know, you're right.
So
It's broken out in a line item there, but that's a great thing. I will have to look back at the report to make sure we actually have that in a line item.
It's not in the draft either.
Well, we will make sure it ends up in the fund.
So there are cost estimates for all those tiered items in that particular project.
Yes, sir.
Looking at the tier 1 costs, these are all well under $1 billion. Is there any chance that they could be funded out of some discretionary fund just to move it down the road?
If you only did tier 1 improvements, while we have, and we do have, I think, the flexibility to do things like that if we were only looking at tier 1 improvements. I think some, you really need to combine some of those more expensive improvements in there to really make it a safer facility, but that's an opinion. I think that you could probably look at ways of only doing tier one, and you would get some benefits from crosswalk improvements, sidewalk repairs, school zone striping, things like that. But some of these are pretty unforgiving corridors that I think are probably deserving of some higher level treatments.
Thank you.
Are you looking to fund all three of those or just?
No, those examples were really just pulled out as being examples of roadways that could be applied to other roadways, to these or other similar roadways in the county. You know, we have a lot of roadways that are very similar to each other in terms of number of lanes, available right of way, things like that. So that's the intention there.
Okay. So to study it and look and see what kind of costs. Yeah.
Yes.
This is Sally Thompson, completely out in left field, but what the heck? The legislation that was passed that's going to provide more funding for the Florida Wildlife Corridor in connection with the Sun Trail Network. I know there's not anything in Hillsborough County area, but I'm wondering if there's any possibilities in the future or something. And with the work that's being done in the west, with Charles Hines in the west.
Yes. Well, one thing, so Mr. Hines is with the Trust for Public Land. That funding, while it does seem to mostly go to the Florida Wildlife Corridor connections, there is just overall increased funding in the Sun Trail program, which I think can be applied to any Sun Trail project. I'll have to look back and see exactly what passed.
Well, that's what I'm wondering too, because it's supposed to be linking to it, and we maybe have an angle there through linkages. And
This is Chris Fellerhoff. The Shell Point Trail, the existing shared use path on Shell Point is a link already between the two segments that are, that's that south section of South 15th. So that would link to our Sun Trail Florida Gulf Coast alignment, but it would not be a direct part of it because it's our Florida Gulf Coast / Sun Trail as it stands now is coming up 301 out of Manatee County, cutting across 19th, and then going up into Waterset, whereas this is just south of 19th. So it's part of our South Coast Greenway, but it is not the part we've identified as the Sun Trail corridor because it's not what would connect to Manatee County. But you could claim it links, yes.
that's what I'm, because I know it's focused on the wildlife corridor, but I hear connections, and I know what we're trying to do in the West Coast.
Great. And I mean, these are really just illustrative selections. It's not necessarily these are the only projects you pull out of the whole network, right?
Right.
So there could be others.
Evaluated the entire network for Hillsborough County roadways, and scored all of those.
So this could be a step in, we could look at the whole map and see other segments which might coincide with.
There are some on-road segments that are on Sun Trail. 19th is a good example.
Right.
The Bypass Canal isn't on road, of course.
Right.
Adamo Drive, which is a state road, of course. There are segments there. Maydell, of course, which is. So we do have a few that are on the Sun Trail network that there might be some funding opportunities there.
I manage the Florida Greenways and Trails Foundation Facebook page, and Ned Bear, who used to work here, who's now working with, used to work for Hillsborough County, but he's now working with Charles Hines and working. He started feeding me all kinds. I thought the Facebook page was almost dead, but he has been feeding me information to post, keeping me on my toes. Had to activate my LinkedIn account. And so I've been posting a bunch of stuff about the funding and everything. If anybody's interested, you might want to check that.
Yeah, I mean, the general change is that they revived the funding and then they almost doubled the annual funding and they kind of
Well, it was just
backloaded,
announced this, just announced this week.
they backloaded it towards the first year. They got a whole bunch of extra money to kind of make up for the years that they didn't. But they're going from 25 to $50 million
But my
every
thing,
year.
that what I'd like
got
to
a bunch
see
extra
happen
in the
this
first
go
year.
around, because I think Hillsborough County's kind of been behind the ball on that,
Oh.
and, whatever the expression is. And I'd like to see us be a little more assertive on the west side of Florida.
Well, we'll see if we can get some applications together.
Right. I don't know what I'm talking about exactly. I know there's money. And I know everybody's going to be saying, oh, there's money. We've got to get it. So
We've been
figure out-
watching that and looking
Yeah.
for what we've got,
Mhm.
point where we can apply for it.
Glenn Watson. So this report, you said scores all those identified segments. Does it also offer suggestions for each identified section?
Only the 4 that we
Only
studied.
four, but just as an example.
Yes.
Okay, I was just thinking, thinking back at the overall map, there's a high priority on Lithia Pinecrest Road, which is currently going under a PDD study. With this report could help.
It certainly, Lithia Pinecrest is a tough one, but it's a tough one money-wise. But I do believe it was a high priority on the map. We can.
And the action you're looking for here is recommend approval of this?
But yes, we are asking for your recommendation to the board of approval for this. But yes, Lithia Pinecrest, portions of it are in the very high and other portions are in the moderate to high.
Just looking real quick, I think portions of 78th, portions of Madison, portions of Maydell, portions of Riverview Drive, probable portions of Gibsonton Drive would all be potential alignments for that Suntrail corridor. So this would just kind of more information about, I think the need, of those corridors that, if these things rank high as having, needing better bike service, and that this would also be a Suntrail opportunity, if we build a side path on those along that, I think that would be, this is good data to have. That's fantastic.
All right, do we have a motion for Wade?
To approve or accept, I make the motion, whatever it's supposed to be, to accept.
I second the motion, Jim Sharp.
Sally Thompson.
All right, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you very much, Wade.
Thank you all. Good to see everybody.
All right, up next, we've got the TIP update with Johnny Wong. Is that correct still, Wade?
Yes. Johnny, will you be presenting? Would you like to go from your computer?
Yeah, if you can let me share my slides, I'll run it faster. All right, awesome. It looks like you all can see my slides, so I'll get started. Johnny Wong, TPO staff, and I'm here to present you with the update to the Transportation Improvement Program. This year, the TIP covers fiscal years 24 through 28. Many of you at the table, no doubt, have sat through this presentation in previous years, including presentations that I've delivered. So I'm going to skip through the first of 3 sections. This first section is information that I think is necessary to decode and understand the TIP. To begin, I think that it's easiest to understand the TIP when you compare it to the other planning work products that the TPO is responsible for. If you look on this slide to the left, I have a picture of the 25-year long-range transportation plan. That plan, of course, it has a very long time horizon, 2+ decades. Out of necessity, the projects included in the LRTP are broad and visionary, simply because we can't specifically identify exactly which roads will need treatments over the course of 25 years. The TIP, however, because it's only the first 5 years of the 25-year horizon, needs to be a lot more specific and accurate, because these are specific prescribed treatments to deal with real problems in the community. So when you look at projects in the TIP, Oftentimes they have specific beginning and end points, phase of the project that is seeking funds, a specific cost estimate, and other details that allow us to advocate for those projects. The TIP is a federally required document, and of course it's subject to a lot of federal as well as state requirements. So prior to the adoption, which is June 14th, we go through a very long checklist to ensure that all of the elements on this slide are included. Beginning at the top, the TIP has to show consistency with that long-range transportation plan. So projects that are in the TIP have to appear in the LRTP, especially widening capacity projects, anything that's funded with federal, like Federal Highway Administration or FTA funds, has to be called out specifically in the LRTP. The TIP also has to be developed in coordination with our partners at DOT and HART, has to include regionally significant projects, has to include any highway or transit projects that are going to be funded with federal dollars, like from FHWA or FTA. It's not a wish list, so the list of projects cost has to balance out with the expected revenue sources. As part of this presentation today and presentations that will be made over the next month, we're developing this plan in consultation with the public. So as of the previous Monday, we posted this to our website. We're making it available to the public for 30 days to review and comment ahead of that public hearing in June. And last, there has to be specific criteria that we use to address and prioritize projects. When I think of the structure of the TIP, I like to explain it as if it's 3 lists that are kind of bundled together and serving different purposes. On the next 3 slides, I'm going to explain what each one of those lists does and the purposes that they serve. So beginning with Table 1. Table 1 is a list of projects that have been designated as priorities, meaning we know or we believe that they will address some urgent need within the community, whether that's infrastructure maintenance, safety, mobility, transportation disadvantage needs, or capacity, right? So these projects, we believe, will move the needle in one of those goal areas. Project's been designated as a priority, and it has some construction funding programmed, meaning that construction will either begin or will be complete within the next 5 years. Projects on Table 1, once they get some construction funding programmed, they remain on that table until construction is complete. We leave them on just so that the public kind of is aware of what construction projects are ongoing or imminent within their community, and also to signal that those projects still have community support. Table 2 is the real heart of the TIP, if you will. It's often called the priority list or list of priority projects, LOPP if you like acronyms. If a project is included on Table 2, it means that it's been evaluated to ensure it will have a positive impact. So it's no longer just a project, it's a project that will fulfill one of our goal areas. And once it's ranked on the list, it is designated as a priority. So if a project's on Table 2, we believe it will move the needle, and it's still seeking construction funding. And then, as you know, once some construction funds are programmed, it'll kind of graduate to Table 1. Table 3 is the longest of the 3 lists. Table 3 includes all projects that have funding programmed within the next 5 years. It includes everything that's listed in the FDOT work program. We also don't have to do this, but we do include all projects from our local governments. Anything that's listed in their capital improvement program, we include for transparency and to ensure that any opportunities for coordination are identified. Some other projects may appear in Table 3 that don't necessarily achieve one of our strategic transportation goals, but may still be important transportation projects. This could be things like herbicide and pesticide applications, landscaping, those kind of miscellaneous transportation investments. Taking a step back to revisit table 2 and discuss like the production process behind that. The process for creating that priority list, table 2, kind of goes like this. So early each year, usually around the end of January or early February, TPO staff will meet with our local government partners and we'll sit at the table and review their current priorities. Any of their projects that are currently listed on table 2, we'll talk about them to make sure that they're still high priorities for the government and that they still, basically we're trying to get an indication from staff whether or not they still want to allocate resources to go after funds to move those projects forward. During that meeting, the local governments often propose new projects that they want to add to the list. So in part, we're assuring that current priorities are still priorities, and we're asking for new priorities. If they have new projects that they want to add to the list, we consult with them and we try to get information like what the project will achieve, the location, cost, some other information so that we can advocate for it and feel confident going after funding to deliver that project. Once we have an idea of what the project can accomplish, we categorize it into one of our 5 programs that are listed at the bottom of this slide, the colorful ones, red, orange, purple, blue, and green. Based on what we believe that project will achieve, it'll get categorized in either red, which is state of good repair. These are mostly infrastructure maintenance projects, transit maintenance projects fall in there too. Orange is safety projects. Purple is smart cities, meaning like congestion alleviation or reliability enhancers. Blue is anything that has to do with mobility, like TD services, trails, side paths, could be sidewalks, bus service. And then green is major capacity projects that facilitate economic growth. Those are often highway widening, highway extension, or mass transit projects. Also some projects that are otherwise just very, very expensive and we won't be able to afford to get lumped into major projects. So once we have those projects categorized in one of those 5 areas, our team seeks out data, we evaluate each project to estimate the impact, and based on the results of that evaluation, the project is ranked among comparable projects, and it's kind of added to the priority list and assigned a number. The last step in developing the TIP is one in which the TPO really adds a lot of value. Once we develop our priority list, we go through and consult with the local governments, identifying revenue sources or funding sources that could be used to deliver that project. And this is kind of a complicated symphony that we orchestrate because oftentimes these projects are funded from a number of different sources, i.e. a number of different agencies. They could be federal and or state and or local. Each one of them have a different timetable for delivering the funds and different requirements. It can get very complicated. And so we add a lot of value to this process by kind of taking the charge and identifying these sources for the locals to go after. Without further ado, I'll move into section 2 of 3, which is presenting you some highlights of the tables that I just described, talking about what has changed from last year through to this year's update. Beginning with table 1, the existing priorities that are funded for construction. Remember, these are projects that have some construction dollars programmed to them. And so this year we were able to add a number of projects to table 1 from table 2, so they graduated, and projects that are in the state of good repair category that have some funding are T-BARTA van pool operations, bus stop capital repairs, HART heavy maintenance facility is partially funded, safety projects falling into Division 0 category, and traffic signalization and intersection project at Boy Scout and Manhattan Ave, 2 sidewalk projects around middle schools out in Plant City. One project was at Marshall Middle School, the other was at Tomlin. An intersection safety project, or sorry, a corridor safety project on Lois Ave from Cleveland to Boy Scout Boulevard, and then several intersection improvements on 301 at the intersections of Harney, Stacy, McIntosh, and Palm River. There's also a partially complete segment of a larger safety project on Fowler, the segment that was completed, or the segment that received construction funds, is from 56 to I-75. A number of mobility projects received construction funding this year, notably Green Artery segments D and E, an intersection project that also enhances sidewalk connectivity out in Hillsborough County's Mango Road at Hillsborough Ave. And then lastly, DOT got some carbon reduction funds that they're using to fill in sidewalk gaps on state roads that fall all across the county. A few big projects received some construction dollars. Big Bend Road eastern portion, there's also a western portion. This is to widen it from 4 to 6 lanes along I-75 or near the interchanges of I-75. Big Bend Road East won TRIP funding, so that project is moving forward now. And the Hart Heavy Maintenance Facility received some construction dollars. There are also some projects that were on Table 1 and are now complete, so they can be removed because they are online. Safety projects, one at Bush Boulevard and Armenia Avenue. Several projects in Hillsborough County that received Safe Routes to School funding have now been delivered. A bike lane project on Morris Bridge Road, and then a safety project on Kennedy Boulevard from West Shore to Woodland. Some other mobility projects moved off of Table 1. I'll talk about them both in turn. The first is a segment of the Upper Tampa Bay Trail Connector. It was a sidewalk project near Lutz Lake Fern Road. Second is the Selman Greenway Trailhead. This project has been on the tip for a number of years, and it was sitting there stagnant. It had not moved forward, so I reached out to Thea and asked them what's going on. In developing that project, during design, they ran into some snafus that couldn't be resolved. So the original design cannot move forward. We decided to remove it from Table 1 because that project will need to start over basically from scratch. Thea is going to have to work on some planning and feasibility to deliver that project. So we're going to take it off now and hope to revisit it in the future. Another major project, or lastly, a major project that graduated off of Table 1 because it's complete, Sam Allen Road widening from SR 39 to Park Road in Plant City. Table 2, we had a lot of additions to Table 2 this year. These are projects that were submitted to us by the local governments, hoping to make it to the priority list, and the ones that I'm going to describe have made it to the priority list. On this slide, there are a lot of continuing needs that are shown. So these projects have received money already in previous years, but they're kind of recurring needs. So they were resubmitted for consideration. At the top of the list is bus replacements and midlife maintenance work to repair transit drivetrain components. So if a bus is starting to age, in order to extend the life of it, a transmission or an engine rebuild may be needed. That request came into us for a total of $17 million from HART. Second bullet on this list is to continue funding the HART Heavy Maintenance Facility until it's complete. That's a request of $5 million. Third on the list is continue funding for bus stop repairs to make them ADA compliant. That's a request of $2 million. And last is a new request from the city of Tampa to reconstruct Bermuda Boulevard seawall from 22nd Street North to Lindsay Street. This was just a request from the government to add it to the list, but there was no funding requested. Moving on to safety projects. There was a request in Plant City for $1 million to design a complete street segment on Collins Street from Alsobrook to Alexander. There's also a request from the city of Tampa to right size Platt Street from Armenia to Parker Street. That would allow for installation of a protected bike lane, and they're also going to do some other intersection improvements out there. That's just a request to get it on the priority list. No funding requested as of now. Third on the list, moving down the list, another City of Tampa request for a safety enhancement on South 22nd Street from US 41 to Marconi. And last, a $300,000 request from Plant City to do a planning study on SR 39 from Alexander Street to Trapno. There were several smart cities priorities submitted. City of Tampa is asking to prioritize traffic signal replacements in Ybor City. This is a very big request, so they're segmenting it out into separate phases. In addition to the signal replacements all across Ybor, the city is also asking for a signal at the intersection of Franklin Street and Water Street, and that project will also include some crosswalk upgrades. Hillsborough County is looking to construct a smart traffic network. This would be a full advanced traffic management system build out, a very big high-tech project. That's a request for $45 million. We're working with Hillsborough County now to see if we can segment that out into smaller fundable chunks. $45 million is a really big ask. So we're going to be working with them to try to split that up. And lastly, Temple Terrace is requesting $100,000 each to do traffic signal warrant studies on 56th Street, one at the intersection of Grove Hill Road and the other at the intersection of Drew and Hills Road. For mobility projects, there was a $1.75 million request to design and construct a segment of the Plant City Canal Connector Trail. This is a brand new trail study that was just completed. I think Wade's team took the lead on this and wrapped it up just a couple months back. So we worked with Plant City over the spring, got them to submit an application, and that's a very competitive project that has a good chance of getting funded this year. There were 3 requests from the City of Tampa. One is some bike and ped enhancements and trail connections on South 26th Street from US 41 to Adamo. And the next 2 are sidewalk gap fill projects. One's on Yukon Street from 22nd to 40th, and others on Rome Ave from MLK to Sly. Last is a Temple Terrace request for $200,000 to complete a feasibility study to do a ped bridge, a pedestrian bridge over the bypass canal somewhere near 122nd Avenue. The last program category, major investments. City of Tampa submitted an $8 million request for operations funding of the Tico streetcar. Some of that money would be used to extend the line north from downtown Tampa up to Tampa Heights. Next is a $14 million request for trip funding from Hillsborough County. As I mentioned earlier, the eastern portion of this project is already funded, but that funding is not going to complete the west side. So the county is asking for 14 mil to complete that bookend near the I-75 interchange. 2 other big requests from the county. One is an $85 million request to fund a portion of construction costs for Lithia Pinecrest to widen it. And next is a $62 million request to fund a portion of right-of-way and construction for Van Dyke Road widening. The last section of this presentation is next steps. So now that I have briefed you on what the new projects are, TPO staff is working with DOT and the local governments to identify which projects we should recommend funding for the next fiscal year. So when we get to the presentation to the TPO board on June 14th, we will have recommendations for board members as to how much of each project they should be funding in fiscal year 29. If the TPO board approves those recommendations, as in if they approve the tip as we presented it, we'll work with DOT over the fall and winter as they're developing their work program to see if we can get money allocated to those projects in the next fiscal year. Some regional coordination is happening, more needs to happen. We are working with the other MPOs of the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance to develop our trip priorities. Remember, trip dollars are what funded that Big Bend Road bookend, and we're looking to get trip dollars to fund the other one. This is a really significant source of dollars, but the MPOs in District 7 have to compete for it. So we work together to develop a priority list. We rank each other's projects, and based on how our Hillsborough specific projects rank on the TRIP priority list, kind of determines whether or not we can deliver those funds to this county or whether it'll go to Pinellas or Pasco. Wade's team is coordinating with the multi-use trail working group, the MUT priority list, if you will, to identify some regionally significant trail projects. And the SCTPA will adopt major projects to its priority list at its July 2nd meeting. I'm not entirely certain of that date, but I know it's in July sometime. We've already crossed a number of milestones and we're getting ready to cross some others. May 15th, we posted this draft to our website, which kicked off that 30-day review period for the public to take a look at and submit comments. Throughout the rest of this month and into June, we're going to be making presentations to BPAC tonight and the other committees in the coming weeks to get their approval of the draft tip. By the end of this month, we will have public notices published in newspapers, Tampa Bay Times, La Gaceta, Sentinel Bulletin. We're going to post roadside signs around affected areas to publicize the public hearing and get people to come out and comment on these projects. And then after the TPO public hearing, our team's going to be doing compliance checks to make sure that we've crossed all the T's and dotted the I's before we submit it to DOT. We presented this to the LRC already, got unanimous approval, presenting it to you this evening. After BPAC, we'll take it to the Technical Advisory Committee and the CAC. And as I've mentioned several times, the TPO public hearing is on June 14th, begins at 6 p.m. and it's going to be in County Center on the second floor. The recommended action for the committee this evening is to approve the TIP update for the fiscal years 24 through 28 and to approve the TIP priority list as it's presented. I've talked a lot, so I'm here to answer any questions and allow you to have your conversation. Thank you.
Does anyone have anything for Johnny?
It's Peter Davitt. Johnny, there was something on there about the TV BARDA van pool. Did they read that they're gone? Or is that somebody else that disappeared in the transit world here?
So because T-BARDA voted to dissolve itself, they did not submit a new request. So we're not looking at funding the van pool in future years. The TPO board did program van pool funds through fiscal year 28, I believe. Whether it's T-BARDA that manages that van pool program, or HARTS, or PSTA, DOT, or some outside agency, that funding is already committed to support the program. So whether T-BARDA has ownership of it or some other entity, it doesn't really matter. We want to make sure that the van pool program is successful, so that money will remain.
Okay.
All right, do we have a motion?
I move we approve Johnny Wong's request.
Thank you. Any second?
Peter Davitt, I'll second.
All right, we got a first and a second. It's Jim Shirk on the motion and Peter Davitt on the second. So all those in favor, go ahead and please say aye.
Aye.
And are there any opposed? Self-known? All right.
All right, great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yep, go ahead, Johnny.
Thanks.
All right, up next, we have a status report regarding the Fowler Avenue studies. And he's doing a PD&E, and we've also got, looks like some from Tampa Arteria BRT and Plant Hillsborough's vision plan. Is that one presentation?
It is.
Presentation?
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll try our best to make it seamless, but
Okay.
yeah, it's, my name's Alvaro Gabalvin. Do I need to do anything here? Okay, thank you. This is Craig Fox and Jesus Garcia from Hart. We're doing 3 different studies and projects on Fowler, but in the spirit of collaboration and presenting our work and coordinating our work as much as we can while it's ongoing, we're going to be talking to you as a group. We came before you as a group last year to kick off the vision plan and the PD&E. I think the PD&E was happening already, but since then we meet once a month and we do our best again to line up our various consultant deliverables and public engagement insights, make sure that we're approaching the community as a unified group and also just to better ourselves and our project outcomes. So Craig's first up, so here he is.
Good afternoon, and thank you everybody for having me here, having all of us here, sorry, this afternoon. Also joined by our consultant on the DOT side, Steve Gordillo with WSP. So any questions or any fruit you want to throw at me, just throw it at us. Just kidding. Hey, tomatoes are a fruit. All right. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Craig Fox. I'm the Deputy FDOT Project Manager for the Fowler Avenue PD&E study. The project manager is Amber Russo, and she is online, but she couldn't make it here tonight due to travel constraints. I'm here today to provide a status update as well as announce our upcoming alternatives public workshop. So there are many factors that led to us conducting a PD&E study, including several other projects near and along Fowler Avenue. Two in particular, the Hillsborough Area Transit or HART's Regional Bus Rapid Transit Study is shown on Fowler Avenue from Nebraska Avenue to Bruce B. Downs Boulevard, and also the Planning Commission's Vision Study, and they'll get into it in the future slides after my presentation. These studies, along with mixed-use redevelopment improvements, mixed-use development improvements at Mosey, and the addition of a new USF football stadium, have contributed to FDOT's need to improve the roadway components on Fowler Avenue. Our study limits run along Fowler Avenue from North Florida Avenue to west of 56th Street, as you can see on that image to the right. The purpose of the study is to address safety for all road users, improve traffic operations, and provide multimodal accommodations. Improvements studied in the corridor include 3 transit alternatives from Nebraska Avenue to Bruce B. Downs Boulevard. And also intersection improvements were evaluated from Bruce B. Downs Boulevard to west of 56th Street. And also bicycle and pedestrian facilities are being enhanced throughout the corridor. So let's look at the existing typical sections on Fowler Avenue. First, from North Florida Avenue to west of Nebraska Avenue, we have a 4-lane divided facility. And then Fowler Avenue is 8 lanes between Nebraska Avenue and Bruce B. Downs. That's in the middle image. And finally, Fowler Avenue expands to a 6-lane, reduces to a 6-lane facility east of Bruce B. Downs to the end of the project limits, which ours is just west of 56th Street. Now, there are existing bike lanes located on both sides of Fowler Avenue from Nebraska Avenue to North 56th Street, and also sidewalks are located throughout the project corridor. The existing right-of-way varies in the corridor from 98 feet to around 230 feet wide, and the proposed speeds vary from 40 miles an hour on the west side all the way to 50 miles an hour at the east side. We analyzed the crash history from 2015 to 2019, and we have heat maps that's shown on the screen. Over 3,300 crashes occurred in the study corridor within that time restriction, with 75% of crashes occurring at 10 intersections. Pedestrian and bicycle crashes account for 120 of the total crashes. For all the crashes, 53 were considered severe, resulting in 9 fatalities. All of the fatalities were unfortunately bicycles and pedestrians. And 46 incapacitating injuries, with 17 incapacitating bicycle and pedestrian injuries. Approximately 88 of the total 120 bicycle and pedestrian crashes occurred between Nebraska Avenue and Bruce B. Downs Boulevard, so that's around 73% occurred within those limits. And that's also where the transit corridor is being proposed. Of the total crashes, 56 were rear end and 20% were angle and left turn crashes. As previously mentioned, the Story corridor is divided into two main segments. The first is the one in green, and that's the transit corridor, and the second one is the innovative intersections in blue. So I'm going to start first with the transit corridor, and that goes from Nebraska Avenue to Bruce B. Downs Boulevard. So this corridor, we're looking at 3 overall transit alternatives, and the first one is the business access transit lane. So this concept, so we call it business access transit lane, or BAT lane for short. So in this concept, the outside general use lanes will be repurposed for buses and right turning vehicles. General use vehicles can utilize the BAT lanes only to make the right turn into businesses, so they can't make the through movements like through intersections and things like that. We also propose 10 feet wide walks along both sides of Fowler Avenue, and only minimal amounts of right-of-way will be required for this concept. The second transit alternative we're looking at is a frontage lane alternative. Now, the frontage lanes will be located separate from the main line of Fowler Avenue and will provide access to local businesses. They would also separate the regional and local traffic, allowing regional travel to move more efficiently throughout the corridor. And buses would utilize the outside, so there'd be a BAT lane on here too. On the outside lanes, you can see on the image. So the BAT lane would be right here. Just hover my mouse over it. So buses would use the outside BAT lane on the main line of Fowler Avenue. 8-foot wide walks are proposed on this concept, each side of Fowler Avenue, and right-of-way would also be required for this concept, but minimal amounts of right-of-way. And the third and final concept we're looking for in the transit alternatives is the median guideway. Now, this concept, there will be a bus-only lane in the median of Fowler Avenue. Stops will be located at or near intersections to allow for safe pedestrian access to and from the transit stations. And also U-turns will be permitted at designated intersection locations. As you can imagine, having the median guideway in the middle of the road would take up the space where the current medians are for left turns. So there'll be strategic U-turn areas where vehicles could access both sides of Fowler Avenue. In this concept, we do propose 10-foot wide walks proposed on both sides of the corridor, and also minimal right-of-way will be required for this concept also. Innovative intersections are intended for, so this is the next part of the segment, the area in green that was the transit corridor. So east of that, so for Bruce B. Downs to 56th Street, then we looked at innovative intersections. So they're intended for major streets with higher volumes, like Fowler Avenue, and also innovative intersections. What they do is that they modify vehicle, pedestrian, and bicycle movements to reduce delay, increase efficiency, and provide safer travel. The FDOT manual on intersection control evaluations was utilized to determine the most appropriate intersection design. And options that are used in these examples include R cuts, through cuts, displaced left turns, and single loop types of intersections. Now, although we did look at all these different types of intersections, you see the note is that no innovative intersection designs were found feasible within this corridor. What they typically do is that they do require kind of more right-of-way, and it's not really just the right context that we're looking for the future development along Fowler Avenue. So now moving on to the safety strategies. The design of Fowler Avenue has used the safety first and foremost. Crash data along the corridor clearly outlines the need for improvements. In order to improve safety, strategies being analyzed include potentially reducing the speed limit, adding mid-block pedestrian crosswalks, and separating the bicycle and pedestrian facilities from the roadway. Now, this project is considered, has considered various environmental effects within this alternative analysis. The project alternatives were evaluated for both natural and cultural resources, and also on social and the physical environments. So this evaluation matrix compares the right-of-way acquisition requirements and the environmental impacts of the preferred alternative to the no-build or do-nothing alternatives, which remains viable throughout the project study. The preliminary costs of the project, including design, right-of-way acquisition, and construction, varies per alternative, from $23 million on the low end to a high of $38 million for the more intensive features. So if you look on this matrix, and we're going to have this on display at the Public Alternatives Workshop, you'll have the no-build alternative first, and then the business access transit lane, which is one of $23 million, a lot less intensive because it's modifying the roadway less than the other alternatives. And then in the middle there's frontage lane at $31 million, and the median guideway tops out the project cost of $38 million. Public engagement is underway and will continue throughout the duration of the study. To date, study kickoff and several small group meetings have occurred, and a newsletter has been mailed out announcing the upcoming Alternatives Public Workshop. The workshop will be held on the evening of Thursday, June 15th, from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. at the University Mall property. More details and registration for the virtual option can be found on the study website. It's going to be shown on the last slide. A public hearing may be held based on the selected project alternative. Now, these plans are consistent with the 2045 Hillsborough TPO's 2045 long-range transportation plan. And now we'll go over the funding and the schedule. So the project is currently funded for design in fiscal years 23 and 24, and construction is funded for fiscal years 25 and 26. Right-of-way funding is pending based on the alternative. Right-of-way funding based on the tentative updates to the FDOT's 5-year work program, and the schedule shows public involvement and the alternatives development is underway, and public involvement is in the top bar here. And the Alternative Public Workshop is June 15th, which is located with the red star here. And then you'll notice that we do have the public hearing, if required, depending on the alternative, is proposed in spring of 2024, with the study being approved tentatively for the summer of 2024. So what are the next steps? So for all three agencies, we're all diligently involved in our respective studies, so this just quickly reviews the next steps timeline. So you see, first we have the PDD study Alternative Public Workshop that's occurring in June 15th. And after that, we're anticipating the PDD study will be approved the alternative will be selected in August of 2023. In the fall of 2023, we anticipate the HART will begin the lane repurposing process. That's required since we would be repurposing the outside lane for something other than general purpose usage. And then the vision plan open house, this is going to be done by the Hillsborough Planning Commission, will occur in the fall of 2023. For the FDOT project, the design phase would begin this fall, actually, of this year. And just a note about the, going back, to number 2, again, we just want to mention that the PDD study would receive NEPA approval, public hearing if applicable, as sort of in the last slide in 24. So that's, again, that kind of depends on what alternative is selected for the transit corridor. So whether we have a public hearing or not kind of determines that studies, impacts our PDD studies timeline. So for more information, you can please visit the study website or feel free to contact the project manager, Amber Russo, and here's her contact information, both her number and email address. And I will next turn it over to Alvaro to present an update on Hillsborough's Planning Commission's Fowler Avenue Vision Study.
Are you taking questions or at the end?
Sorry, we waited till the end, but what is your?
That was a lot of
We can do
information.
questions now since there was a lot of content.
That's fine.
Well, it's fresh. That's okay.
Sure.
Yeah. I guess I got one. Can maybe to start off is that are all three alternatives genuinely cost feasible, or were they like contingent upon some additional funding source?
Well, so they are cost feasible to the department, but then there does have to be an agreement on as far as what's funded between the department and HART. And of course, HART would actually, would need funding to actually provide the service along the corridor too. So it's kind of a joint agency kind of ask. So they're all feasible, but what we have in our pockets right now is always, kind of the driving factor.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that it is feasible for FDOT, but not necessarily HART.
May or may not be in the future, depending on which alternative we move forward with. And if you got a line, let me know.
Anyone else?
I have a question. So was that the Abigail Flores, Hillsborough County, the predominant crash type was rear end crashes? Was that correct on here? So which alternative is best addressing those crashes?
Well, rear ends, rear ends may be the predominant crash type. Those are typical things that happen once you have a signalized intersection. Once you do anything to really slow down traffic, you're gonna, traffic signals, they do tend to increase the amount of rear ends. So you can either, one thing you do to relieve rear end crashes is to get rid of signals. You can separate the road. That's not something that we're proposing in this corridor at all. So what our main focus is on reducing kind of the severe fatal crashes. So those tend to be, like I mentioned, all the fatalities were with bikes and pedestrians. So we're kind of want to attack the most severe injury types of crashes, which are occurring to the most vulnerable road users by providing things like the wider sidewalks and actual, and having the lane repurposing.
Okay, and what's the speed reduction you're looking at? What's the target design speed? So what's the design speed that you want?
We're still working on getting that target design speed, and that's even then it's still going to be dependent on which alternative we move forward with too. So that'll be determined more and more in the design phase.
Is HART going to come up also? Or?
Yeah, but that presentation later on.
Oh, what's the land use along the corridor? Is it consistent land use throughout the corridor, study corridor?
Do you mean like, is it all the same fluid category along Fowler Avenue?
Yeah, like is it, what's the context class of the roadway?
Well, the context class would be different. There's FDOT context class, and then actually Fowler and Hillsborough, so Hillsborough County and the city of Tampa's jurisdictional boundaries meet just north of Fowler Ave. So it like bisects University Mall parking lot. So like Portillo's is like 3/4 of it is in the cafe, is in the city. Anyway, so to answer your question, no, there isn't a consistent future land use along it. That's kind of what our study is trying to accomplish, is to take advantage of this opportunity to create the opportunity for developers to create a physical environment that behooves transit and takes advantage of like pedestrian, improvements that Craig is talking about. But yeah, land use wise, it's not consistent. And actually you have two different jurisdictions that add a variability to the land use that's there along Fowler. And Jesus is here to answer questions about HART. He doesn't technically have like slides in the presentation, but if you have any questions, please go.
Yeah, I wanted to know, what is the ridership along this corridor? Because there's other corridors in unincorporated county, and we're looking to see the possibility of doing things like this, prioritizing bus and bike access. So what's the ridership here compared to other corridors?
Yeah, go ahead.
My voice is not as powerful as Alvaro's. So we don't currently, so this is the Florida-Nebraska Fowler corridor. Florida is our top two. It's first place is, they fight for it, Route 6 and Route 1. So Florida is like top ridership, but Fowler proper, and that's partly why we opted to not have a HART piece for this presentation, because it's confusing, because the HART corridor is longer than just Fowler. So Fowler is like a little zoom in into the whole BRT. So the whole thing is big. Fowler proper, we don't have service currently there as described here. We have one route that stops at 15th Street. So yeah, Fowler proper, I couldn't tell you, but Florida is one of the biggest.
And your idea was to link the route that you have on Florida with this section of Fowler Avenue?
Yeah, so this, the Route 1, the Florida route would become the BRT. So we're right now looking at what that would look like, because right now it goes all the way to Fletcher of Florida. The BRT was proposed to like deviate from that because of all the development of Fowler and high need as well. That was why, but right now the Route 1, the Florida route doesn't go this way. Hard right now we're like the senior in high school that when you ask them what they want to go and study in college, they don't really know. So that's why we're still sorting a lot of things out.
I have a few questions. So there's an alarming statistic in here, and I just want to make sure it's correct for the record. In 5 years, from 2015 to 2019, the only people who got killed on Fowler Avenue between Florida Avenue and 56th Street were bicyclists and pedestrians.
Yes.
And so while rear end crashes are a high thing, we're not really doing too much to the roadway to address those because those just kind of happen. What we've decided to address is bike ped stuff, and by doing that, we're proposing these wide sidewalks.
Well, in addition to the sidewalks, so there's a couple things that we're proposing. So by doing the lane repurposing on the outside lane, that also does improve the overall safety. We're also proposing additional mid-block crosswalks throughout the corridor. Right now, there are few, if any, existing along the corridor. And also by, providing for that transit lane that does reduce the amount of traffic that's going to be in those outside lanes. Well, depend on the concept, of course.
Can we look at the concepts again?
Sure.
Also, so number one has 10-foot, what you're calling a wide walk.
Yes.
And you've taken the bike lanes off the road. So bikes and peds are now sharing 10-foot sidewalks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then number two, so on all of these, you've taken the bike lanes off the road.
Yes.
Okay, number two, you've got an 8-foot sidewalk.
But then you do have the frontage lane system.
So what's the frontage lane system? What purpose does that serve? I was a little unclear on that.
So the frontage lane, basically what it is that, in this case, so that's a driveway that's kind of shown proposed there, but there's also a lot of driveways along the corridor. So to access the businesses outside of Fowler Avenue, and maybe, and this representation doesn't really show how exactly that will work. What we have is you actually have a slip lane that kind of takes you to there, so it wouldn't be like a direct weird right turn like this is.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to have these on the actual roll plot concepts at the Alternatives Public Workshop. So you get in that slip lane and then you enter into this frontage lane system and then be able to make your right turn. It's going to be much slower speeds along here, of course, much lower volumes, because it's just going to be the vehicles turning into there. So cyclists will be able to take advantage of this lane and have a lot less traffic.
Buses are still in a dedicated lane.
Yes, business.
Which also kind of becomes a decel lane for people to then flip over to the frontage lane to actually access a driveway.
Yes.
And bikes can use that frontage lane as well.
Yes.
These people are kind of merging into as they find gaps in the median. Is that median for the buses?
Right here?
So that the front, that will be there except for the cuts to let people, no, I'm over there on the side where I see the bus stop.
Yes.
So between the bus lane and the frontage lane, there's a median of some sort.
Yes.
That's cut intermittently to allow people to go from the bus lane to the frontage lane.
That's correct.
Okay. And then the next one is the center bus lane, which you say people will access at intersections, but in the graphic, it looks like they just magically have to fly over there to catch the bus. but you'll have crosswalks at the intersections, which is how people will get to.
Yeah. And again, so this is just a typical section that just shows just the overall like roadway concept. But on the road plots, we do have proposed crossings, and it'll be a lot more visible there to see how that actually function. But there's marked crosswalks at every proposed bus stop, so that folks, and it's and not only marked but also signalized.
10-foot wide sidewalks, which are also going to be cut by driveways with great regularity. Here.
Yeah.
Have you thought about any access management work?
Access management as far as in the private
Reducing
properties?
the number of driveways.
That would require, well, we're not really in control of the land that's outside of the department right of way. And unfortunately, a lot of the businesses along there are well, I mean, if you want to cross this, cross business access, that involves modifications to private right of way, which is just a jurisdiction over.
But I guess what I'm saying is that I'm not sure this solves the bike ped safety problem to put everyone on trails with that many driveways. And knowing Fowler Avenue as I do, you've got, and the statistics seem to bear out, it's pretty dense bike and ped traffic out there. So definitely an 8-foot facility is not wide enough for bikes and peds to share safely. It's substandard as an ASHTO trail. 10-foot is bare minimum, and with the volumes of bikes and peds you have out there, it's probably not enough. And I think taking away, I guess the frontage lane does provide something new for bikes, but the other two scenarios, put the bikes on a trail with pedestrians with the same amount of driveways on, I mean, it's a corridor that has achieved vision zero for everybody but bikes. And so it's working well for the cars, but it's still killing selectively pedestrians, bicyclists only. And I think probably more needs to be done if you want to solve that problem. So that's a reaction to this presentation.
May I?
Yeah.
Following up on what you're saying, I have some safety concerns with the frontage road concept. Because I see people coming down Fowler every day and shooting across, getting into the bus lane and then shooting across the frontage lane to their exit, to the cross street or the driveway they're trying to enter. And some poor bozo on a bike that they don't see is getting nailed by somebody trying.
I mean, are those going to be cut?
I was a poor bozo in a car and got hit by one.
Yeah.
Some idiot.
I mean, I see a lot of rapid last-minute movements where you spot the driveway you're trying to get, and you have to get into this frontage lane, so you get into the bus lane, and you do that. And if there happens to be a bike there, too bad. But at least they're not. I don't know.
Can you guys hear me?
That's my professional judgment. It gives me the willies.
Can you guys hear me?
Have there been corridors where this has been tested elsewhere?
Okay.
Well,
I work at well-built bikes. I work at well-built bikes, so I have to ride from Bush and 48 to University Mall every day and back. The traffic is horrible on Fowler. No matter where you try to cross, it's like praying Frogger. More so in the intersection in the corridor of 30th Street to Nebraska. It is extremely horrible to cross, even with the cross sections with the light. It's hard because people are just zooming through Fowler like it ain't nothing, like it's a race or something. And as far as the corridor for Nebraska and Bruce B. Downs, it is a dangerous area because I've ridden my bike over there too, headed towards Wesley Chapel and Lutz and all that. And it's the same thing. They're like, people are in a rush, especially during rush hour times. They're in a rush to get home and get to wherever it is they got to go. And they're not paying attention and they're just flying through these intersections. So it makes it again like a game like Frogger trying to cross there. I don't know how many of you actually ride through these corridors, but like I said, I've been through all these streets in Tampa, and I know some of the stuff that I have recorded, crashes as well as fatalities. I got one from Nebraska and Bruce B. Downs, and I have 2 or 3 from at least Fowler.
I have a quick question on your 9 fatalities over the 5-year period. You identified in one of those maps where they occurred. Did your review or analysis include how the circumstance was in regards to each of the 9?
Yeah, we do look at the long form crashes in regards to that. I don't know off the top of my head the details of them, but yeah, that is reviewed.
Surmise likely was not a rear end. I'm going to surmise that it was likely a crossing Fowler.
Okay.
So, what is when you're developing this, those type of plans are coming.
I imagine it's crossing or it's somebody getting clipped as somebody's turning into a driveway.
Yeah.
You know,
One of the two.
that's where people get hit. And the problem.
So my point is simply is can we make sure as you're developing this that we address however these circumstances can at least be addressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I second that because I think that if the thesis here is that that's, while statistically it's a low number, those are the severe crashes are really catastrophic. I mean, especially selecting out the most vulnerable users in ways that are beyond anything I've never seen a corridor where it's just like, oh, we didn't kill anybody in a car here in 5 years. Wow, that's congratulations. I mean, you've designed a road for cars. But something tells me that, like, I don't see anything about speed management here. And I have to think that speed is a contributing factor to most of those crashes for bikes and peds. And
I second that. Yep.
And so what we've done is we've separated them nominally, but we still haven't, it doesn't sound like I don't feel like the driveways are any safer. I don't feel like the crossings are any safer. And I mean, they're fully separated, but separated facilities are bad at driveways. And if you, we can't see where the crossings are being added here, so it's hard to gauge. But if you just separate people such that, you know, it's tempting if you're in the bike lane to just peel off and try to cross the street mid-block if you see a gap, where if you're fully separated, I guess you have to go to the end. But in an environment like Fowler, people aren't going to do that. You need very frequent crossing opportunities, or else you're going to have wildcat crossings because they've got incredible wait times at the signals. They've got very short walk signals. They've got all this kind of stuff that the environment completely disincentivizes them making the safe choice for themselves.
Yeah.
More needs to be done to
we
address
definitely
speed and access.
Yeah. As far as the crossing goes, the signals, of course, signals. You know, I mean, I completely agree. Signals, the crossings there do take more time, which is why we are, you know, as part of the project, we're also proposing and encourage more of the mid-block crosswalks that are more, you know, you're more likely to get a signal faster, you know, stop traffic faster at a mid-block than at a regular signal, just because all the different movements going on. So I definitely agree with you on there. And as far as although rear ends are the most ones, again, I want to reiterate that that's not necessarily the target of reduction that we're trying to do. We're trying to more so reduce, you know, the bikes and fatalities. And all these comments, they are being heard. You know, they are being heard. And we are going to look at what we can do to, you know, if we could do anything to widen, you know, the sidewalks more. You know, we're certainly looking at that. There are certain restrictions that we're dealing with, you know, throughout the corridor, but you know, we're definitely taking these comments to heart, and we'll we can improve on it. That's why we have these meetings initially, so that we can make better designs in the future.
It'd be great to see.
I also wanted to say that I agree with him and what he's saying about slowing down the traffic. If you slow down the attitudes of people driving, especially during the corridor of 30th Street and 15th, that's where I see the most crashes and people just trying to dart across, and as well as I myself. And he's talking about driveways, like when they're trying to pull out of the Radiant or trying to pull from the Party City or any of those. They're not really paying attention. They're paying more attention to the cars driving at super high speeds. I've seen cars, when I leave here at 6 o'clock, the traffic is horrible. I'm on the corner of where the mall is at by the Mexican restaurant where Pizza Hut and all that little plaza there, and it's virtually impossible to cross. I really have to wait 15, 20 minutes because they're flying down that road in that section off of 30th Street. So if you could change the attitudes of people slowing down on Fowler, especially in that little corridor right there, because that's mostly where a lot of people cross between 30th Street and 15th.
I had a question kind of to build on Abigail's question on the target speed. You mentioned you might be looking at different ranges for each alternative. I mean, what is the minimum target speed for some of these that you're looking at? I mean, especially like the frontage road, the difference between those two on the speed would make a huge difference. So do you have some preliminary things you're looking at for that? Is there anything you can share on what that is?
Hi, this is Amber Rousseau. I'm not unable to raise my hand. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, sorry. This is a really good discussion. I'm taking a lot of notes and I wanted to clarify a few things. But first, to Kelly's question, I know there have been kind of informal discussions on the target design speed for really the hotspot corridor that we're looking at on the screen from Nebraska to Bruce V. Downs, where the main fatalities were. I know 35 miles per hour has been thrown out there, but really once we are further along, we know our alternative and we know exactly what we're looking at, that's when we'll have a more formal discussion on the speeds. Right now it's 45, and like I said, 35 has been thrown out there, but there hasn't been like a real analysis or discussion on what we would be wanting to propose.
Oh, and as far as the contest classification, it's C3C or commercial suburban commercial. It's contest classification, and that's according to DOT.
Yes, so when we started our PD&E study to kick off the project, we did do a context classification analysis. This was before the vision study really came online for FDOT's knowledge purposes. So we were the C3C was based on the existing and future Hillsborough County land use maps, which obviously with the vision study, those will be changing. So the context classification will be evolving through the end of the PD&E study and through design, because when we develop our typical sections and put them in a formal package, we have to identify the context classification. So it's not set in stone, and it can definitely be updated as we move into design.
I could make a couple comments. First, I would say if you were to ask anyone if they think this area is suburban, I don't think you'd have anyone that would agree. So I would suggest more on the line of like a C4 context classification. And then I guess also I kind of second a lot of the thoughts that Chris had regarding design speed, is that we don't really know which of these concepts is going to achieve that greatest amount of reduction. And I feel like that's the most critical element you can do to reduce the fatalities happening out here. So when crashes do occur, it's going to be less severe. And then I guess from the typical section, I don't know which of those three alternatives would provide like the most crossings, right? Because that to me is kind of the biggest thing that would probably make the most difference in addition to the speed. Is providing adequate and numerous crossings, because I mean, I'll probably get into this a little bit later, but I looked at the crashes, the fatal and serious biking type crashes on Hillsborough Avenue, right? And there's a gap between, they've got a PHV at 12, and they've got a signal at 15, but there's a ton of fatal and serious injury crashes at 13. And you measure that distance, it's not very far, and people are still risking it rather than going that extra distance. So that's why I kind of say we really need to provide dense crossing opportunities for people. And yeah, I think the roll plots would go a long ways to see where are the crossing locations, how many of them there are, and you know, get a better sense of how the corridor would drive and feel for target speed. So
Yeah, yes, just one, just two things you mentioned. So as far as the roll plots go, we're gonna have those on the project website just a little bit before the alternative public workshop. We're just still refining them and wrapping them up. So and of course they'll be on display there too. And a little off topic, but in regards to Hillsborough Avenue, we're actually conducting right now community conversations with East Tampa communities on MLK, Hillsborough Avenue, 40th, and Nebraska Avenue. And one of the things we're looking into is to improve the amount of crossings on Hillsborough Avenue more than we have what we have today, along with different median things and other different proposals that's brought about the community. So yeah, I actually live pretty close to Hillsborough and yeah, pretty familiar with that stop. Yeah, people do cross there a lot too. So completely agree, man.
good, glad you're looking into it, and yeah. So.
Yeah.
What else? I really appreciate you taking all these comments too, by the way. I know.
Yeah. It's Peter Davitt. I live in Temple Terrace. Tonight I will drive home on Fowler, right down this stretch. I can almost guarantee you that someone between 15th and 30th Street will cross in the middle of the block, either on their bike or on their feet. And they'll either pedal, walk, run, or dash. I can almost guarantee it. Every night we go back and forth. We'll go down to yoga, down at Seminole Heights. We'll go downtown during the week or the weekend. We come back all the time. She sits next to me in the car and she says runner, walker, bicycle. And we're both looking for people moving in the middle of the block.
Yeah.
It's crazy. The fact that only 9 died, I think that's a miracle. Because I see it. I see it every single time I drive through there. My impractical solution for you would be to put an 8-foot wall from 30th Street to 15th. Seriously, don't laugh at that. Seriously. And then make them use the intersection and don't let them make U-turns. Don't let them come out of the steakhouse and go 6 lanes across and pull in to get a chicken sandwich. I see it. You do it yourself. You drive down there at night, go down like on a Friday night or a Thursday night and just watch them. They run back and forth. It's crazy. And the cars that come out, they don't stop. They don't look. That's where your rear end crashes come out. It's not a left turn. They made a left to go onto Fowler going eastbound. They're going 20 miles an hour. The car's doing 60. Rear end crash, right? I mean, that's the problem. The problem is that there's too much interchange in the middle of those blocks. And I know you're not going to put a wall. It's an impractical solution, but it would stop the people from dashing from one side to the other.
Yeah, and that has been something that's, I mean, I'm not gonna say we can definitely do it, but there are certain situations on state roads where you do have some kind of separation within the median or barrier within the median to encourage crossings at better designated locations. So, you know, that's something that we could consider, but of course there are.
And if you went with that center one with this center, we talked about this last time you brought this to us. If you did that one with the 2 center lanes and
the median guideway,
that just means the people are going to run. They're going to run 3, walk across, skip across the 2 bus lanes, onto the concrete, and run 3 more. That's going to make it easier and more encouraging them to not use the crosswalks. That would be the worst choice. In my mind, the worst choice.
Yeah, and I do just want to note, so at all the transit stops, there are going to be, there's actually 2 crosswalks on either side of the transit stops and with the median guideway concept. And when the bus pulls in, they'll actually be able to shut down the traffic in each direction of the road to provide people opportunities to cross. But I mean, I know, and then that crossing will also be available to bikes and pedestrians, you know, right. Even if there's a bus there or not.
Only 3 lanes right now. They have 4 or 5 to cross.
Yeah.
If they only had 3 and there's a concrete median in the middle, they're gonna forget it.
It's gonna become a crosswalk.
And if they have to get across to get on the bus.
Right. Forget it. They'll get even worse. It'll be far worse.
When the bus isn't there, it's a crossing refuge, unofficially. I just wanted to reflect on what Peter said. I mean, yeah, it's true. Like, one option is to try to really reduce the amount of opportunities for people to flip U-turns because they're always cutting out and trying to make a quick, find the left turn they can't make as quick as possible. And there's people out there, but I mean, a lot of that is a reflection of, that's the land use around there has that much activity. There are that many businesses there. There are that many people walking and biking. So it's not suburban. It is effectively urban. And we've got a road that's basically designed as almost a freeway running right through that environment. And it's gotten to the point where it's like, well, we got to choose. And I mean, what Peter proposed would be safe, but that would be choosing the efficiency of the road as a high volume, high speed connector between I-75 and I-275. Or that this is, the heart of a major, university business and residential district that usually is in an urban neighborhood, but has grown into what was originally a suburban environment. But I mean, I think that's what we've got to recognize, that this context is highly urban, and we've probably got to slow the road down rather than restrict the motion of people. I mean, my kids had an activity out at the Temple Crest Elementary School, way over there by the bypass canal. And before we lived in Tampa Heights, now we live in Lutz. So after that, I would drive all the way across from the canal to 275. And that road is designed brilliantly to get me. There were numerous times I would text my friend who also works in transportation. The signals there are progressed so brilliantly that I've made it from the bypass canal to 275 without a red light on numerous occasions. That's what that road is designed to do, and it does it really well. But the flip side is that it selects only pedestrians and bicyclists to be killed. I mean, it's it's not conscious, but we've got this giant road, this giant, very fast, efficient road in the middle of this high density and getting denser district, and we got side, which we want.
Yeah, I think the 35 mile per hour should be the target.
Yeah, and that's what I don't see any speed stuff in these proposals, really.
But yeah, I think you're right. It's an urban corridor. It needs to move in that direction. I think that would be the target speed to push it there.
Sure. Yep.
Not to steal Alvaro's thunder. I think that train has left the station, but so a couple of things. We are thinking of Fowler as today's Fowler, and we just striped a lane on it. I think part of this process would be make Fowler safer, so I think that's why it's important, everything you guys are saying. The median, there is this thought that it would incentivize more crossing because the bus station is in the middle, but every rider has to cross at some point, because when you come, you get off, you do your business, and then when you want to go back, you need to get the stop on the other side. So the crossing is going to happen regardless. Whether you make it a crossing 2 3-lane highways or crossing 1 6-lane highway, that's a different conversation. But yeah, there's a lot of elements that go into safety. Oh, and about your question about funding, HART is actually part of figuring it out. We are kicking off the design of the low cost alternative, which doesn't include the median. So the median will be like a future, if funds become available thing. Like right now we're going for the level 1 thing on the hard end, but then, well, thank you.
Any other questions on this portion or? Okay.
All right, well, I feel like collectively, maybe we stole some thunder, but that's great because I took a lot of notes too. And there's a lot of concerns that you are bringing up. The community in this area has also brought up in our public engagement. And then also as land use planners, we're also very aware of the retail commercial environment that's there, and how it, again, interacts with the road. So, I mean, I think this is the $1 million question, and maybe, maybe we're the pioneers here trying to connect land use and transportation. I feel like you hear that phrase everywhere, but literally, like Craig and Amber and the team on this vision study, that's what we're chatting and talking about and translating oftentimes between the two different planning regimens, like how we can recognize each other's limitations or bottlenecks, right? So speed obviously is something that is apparent, across the board with the community, with the land use planners, and with FDOT. And I'll just reiterate something that Amber mentioned, is that in the design phase, this vision study is still ongoing. So that's the opportunity here, is that we get to interact with each other and influence each other. So the vision study team has brought up context class. It's a little confusing because land use also uses context class, but there's a temporal aspect here where FDOT looks at what's there today, right? You all are looking at very tangible design alternatives. And what I'm about to talk to you about is like a vision, and it's very abstract, right? Because it deals with future land use. it deals with the rules that a developer has to use to build something new, right? So there, I feel like that's the $1 million question, is like, how do we bridge the gap between FDOT that's going to build something and between us who are trying to incentivize, convince, and slowly chip away at the physical environment that's on Fowler right now. And then you add on top the fact that Hillsborough County and City of Tampa meet at this road, and you can kind of understand why there's so many resources being allocated to understand this place. So that's kind of my elevator pitch or rant, if take it for what it is. But this vision study, again, is primarily looking at the land use along this corridor. We go all the way to Temple Terrace's boundary. And just another, I guess, administrative thing, Temple Terrace, at the time, their planning staff wanted to be kept in the loop, but they weren't a primary partner in the study, and that's simply why they're not included here. But this is our study area, so you can see all the way from 275 to Temple Terrace's boundary on 52nd, and then the residential neighborhoods north and south, also incorporating that large area of industrial land that like Yingling is on, Pepsi is there. You have Yingling building a hotel, creating sort of this like nouveau Busch Gardens there. So you're going to have a lot of entertainment and tourism there. You have University of South Florida. You have student housing being built. So, you can see a lot of the drivers of bike ped traffic, car traffic, and what Chris said, this like central commercial business employment center is here today, and it's only going to get denser. So, the way I'm looking at this, the way the vision study is looking at this is like, it's the opportunity, oftentimes you think about transportation and land use, you get stuck in this chicken and egg paradigm, right? So in this situation, because FDOT's doing their PD&E now, they're going to build something now, we can inform our vision study to set up the land use to create an environment where FDOT can react to the physical reality at another point to perhaps, hopefully, create a context, switch the context class to something that's more appropriate. But I don't want to speak for you or put words in your mouth. Again, this is visionary, right? So I'm going to pull you all out of this design thing and into this sort of abstract land use thing. But that's sort of a summation of what's going on. This is our study area. So basically, since the three of us last talked to you, we went about our project processes. So for us, what that included was doing a community workshop in December. We've had an online survey open to the community since then, asking very broad questions just about what challenges do you face living here, working here, or playing here. Our project website has been up, and we've been doing briefings with the Planning Commission and other boards and organizations in the community. I've been to several Soaring City Advisory Board meetings. Where we've partnered with the staff there at University Mall to try to spread the word about this process. again, just trying to collect the community's perspective on what's going on here. And so we have some progress to share in terms of that. I kind of alluded to some of this stuff. So we've had the survey. We did some walking tours with mostly like neighborhood leaders, HOA leaders were the people who showed up. It was open to everybody. And I hope that they took back what they learned to their communities. But, you know, we did a walking audit. So, you know, we experienced what it was like to cross Fowler in front of University Mall. We used the pedestrian bridge in front of Mosey. So that's something that we did. We did stakeholder focus groups, which were focused on organizational leaders in the area. So, you know, we talk about this being a main hub of employment. You have a bunch of hospitals, you have the VA, you have Mosey, USF. Those employers were in our stakeholder focus groups. And we had, you know, the new CEO of Mosey had a lot of really interesting things to say, and he has a very outward perspective on Mosey's role, and that's pretty exciting about this area as well. But, you know, we're hoping to have a second community workshop later in the summer, and again, sort of coordinate with FDOT to amplify or to provide more opportunity for the community to engage with these alternatives and with the land use vision that we're creating here. So this is just some numbers around what we've done. We did 4 walk and talk groups. One of them was exclusively USF staff. They're currently doing a master plan, and of course they're building their stadium. So they've got a lot going on too. This Fowler area is really just buzzing, for lack of better words. There's a lot of private development, redevelopment pressure on the industrial land around Yingling as well. So there's a lot to account for. These are some highlights from what we've heard from the community and from those organizational leaders. I've just bolded some in blue that seem to sort of permeate across topics. So, you know, we heard a lot from the community that Fowler is just a physically and socially dividing presence in there. You know, like people often don't, you know, they don't consider themselves from like one side of Fowler or the other. So that, I mean, that's speaking to sort of the jurisdictional boundary that Hillsborough County and City of Tampa meet there. You know, talking to the development community, again, like a place like Portillo's, like a quarter of it is in the county and 3/4 of it is in the city, and that's pretty crazy. So like, you know, like, do they call the Hillsborough County Sheriff? Do they call City of Tampa? Like, you know, let alone like getting a permit or something like that. So there's a lot of reason for these jurisdictions to come together and not only adopt consistent land use regulations, but, you know, treat this community as like a cohesive place and not just this bisected piece of land. So speed, you know, I mean, we've talked that to great extent already. You know, just some pedestrian realities. You know, you hear lack of shade. You hear that it's impossible to walk to things. You hear a lot of those sort of like really hard words, like impossible, like everything feels really far, like you're in this like weird liminal space that's just like, you know, parking lots. It's kind of bizarre once you get on foot in that area. So in terms of what land use can do for that, though, is that you know, we can hopefully incentivize, or, you know, for lack of better words, like force developers to put buildings in certain orientations to help the visual, you know, reality of this area. Something that sticks out to me hearing all these more transportation related bits of feedback, they also overlap with the feedback we're getting from the community here. And when you hear like, there's so many signs, it's just like, you get like sensory overload on Fowler because there's just tons of cars, they're going so fast, it's such a wide viewscape, it's just, it has none of the visual cues that you shouldn't be doing 80 miles per hour, that you should cross a road or something. It's pretty crazy. So a lot of what I said is more, more, what's the word? It's better explained in this report from our consultant. It's available at our project website. So you can get an overview of our study area, demographics, the employment numbers. This area has a humongous amount of jobs that people are driving to from other places in the county. You can see existing studies, because Fowler has been studied very much throughout the last 15, 20 years. And you can see our consultants' equity analysis, and you can see some of the consultants' pulling these insights together in relation to land use. So if that's something that you want to delve more into, this report absolutely has that analysis, and it sets the stage for what we're doing next. So we've kind of done the homework, we've talked to the community, and now in our next phase, we're going back to them to verify that we heard them correctly with a vision statement. And this statement is something, again, that we're seeking from, we're seeking consensus from Hillsborough County and the city of Tampa to bind their approach to this area. So I won't read it out loud, but you can see some of the standard words that you see in a lot of these, but vibrant, inclusive, diversity, people, businesses, live, work, and play, safe, and it's accessible. So, but I think ultimately those pictures kind of tell more of a story of what we hope the land use mechanism that we develop with coordinating between the two jurisdictions, that's the hopeful outcome of this exercise. So just to drill down into more like policy objectives that this plan will ultimately explore is how we create a community identity. Again, a lot of people really fiercely identify with being from this area, but there's a lot of history in this area too, but they feel disconnected. And you know, personally, I feel like it's just a physical thing. Having this exercise where all these people can sort of talk to each other about being from this area, you know, we hope to create that identity for them in this plan, and again, have that adopted by City of Tampa and Hillsborough County. But obviously, we want to improve mobility and connectivity. The ways you do that through land use, again, it could be building orientation. I think a certain extent we can influence access management. So, you know, I heard a lot of discussion about driveways, and those are notes I definitely took down and hope to chat with the consultant about more. Improving safety is pretty broad. I think that's, you know, right now, again, you have a lot of those empty spaces. So safety in terms of, yes, crossing the road is very dangerous, but like our study goes into the residential areas. It's very dark. There's a lot of empty, unused parking lot there. That was something that a lot of the residents brought up very frequently. And of course, there's always the threat of displacing the residents there when you do create land use tools and incentives to create redevelopment. So that's always something that we're hoping to balance, and especially with Fowler, because the business community there is very diverse. People are very proud of that diversity. You know, it's nothing like Water Street or something like that. There's a huge amount of international grocery stores. There's tons of really great food places up there. So that's also something that people there were proud of and wanted to protect. So this is an example of a mechanism that our consultant is flushing out. So again, this is more of a land use mechanism, but dividing our study area into districts, and each of those districts having land use that is conducive to, I guess, kind of how they're named. So you can see that the Fowler Avenue in front of your University Mall to 275 is a mixed use center. You can see the industrial lands being more of an employment center, and again, those neighborhood areas, so neighborhood transition and just single family neighborhood, if you want to think of it like that. So the areas above the mall have a lot of apartments and like naturally occurring affordable housing, and then when you go even further, again, that's why it's kind of a transition, as you're kind of getting into single family homes up above the mall. So like ways we can accomplish these objectives is again, just, it sounds so simple, but it's a tremendous challenge, but creating a standard for intensity and density between City of Tampa and Hillsborough County along Fowler. And then within those standards, building a land use mix that allows for businesses, mixed use, residential on top of commercial, creating that walkable scape. I mean, people are walking here anyway. They're trying to get to services, and you know, maybe pulling these buildings together in a way that creates a more cohesive environment, you know, helps that. And then also, like, again, reinforcing that identity through a sense of place, putting some urban design regulations into this area, enhancing community support infrastructure. There's a lot of nonprofits in this area. There's just a lot of activity in this area, and a lot of people who are willing to buy into something. So And again, increasing mobility, connectivity, building form and placement, and exploring our options for implementation, which could be a phase 2 of this study, and involves further coordination with the city of Tampa and Hillsborough County in terms of like their land development codes and other implementation tools. Next steps for us, we'll be traveling with Craig, doing the TPO tour of the advisory committees. You guys are the first stop. Our final stop will be the TPO board in August. So obviously, FDOT's Public Alternatives Workshop will be happening before that TPO board. So we'll be able to sort of update this presentation. Our consultant owes us an update as well. They're still further analyzing the more specifics of the land use tools they're recommending. So some of the other committees may get an updated presentation. And our open house we're hoping to have in August sometime, of summer 2023. My name is Alvaro Gabaldon. I am Planning Commission staff. Jay Collins is my supervisor and partner on this project. That's our contact information. And just to reiterate again, Craig, Amber, and I, Jesus, Jay, these teams, we meet monthly and we share our updates as quick as we get them. Just trying to take advantage again of this window that's happening where FDOT's going to build something. So we're just trying our best to be good partners and keep each other informed. So as a part of that, here's our next steps. Like I mentioned, our open house is going to happen after the alternative is selected. So that just gives the public another opportunity to sort of look at that and hopefully draw connections between the vision and the road. And then, you have some of the other phases from HART and FDOT. So that's my update, and I'm available for any questions. The three of us are all still here too, or the two. Yeah.
All right, Alvaro, thank you very much for that presentation. So I think we're going to try to keep the comments and questions pretty light.
Fair enough.
Given the time, we still have a couple other things we want to talk about. So.
Fair enough. You have my contact. We're here.
Thank you. All right, so that's the last of the status reports, and I guess we have you guys are free to peace out if you'd like. I don't want to keep you here just for some internal business and stuff. So.
Hey, Craig, can I get on your mailing list?
Yeah.
Yeah, I give you email contact or something? I'm sorry, can I give you an email contact?
Yeah. All right, so the other two things. All right, Craig, I appreciate it. Thank you for your presentation. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and ask item C, the new Plan Hillsborough website. We'll save that for another meeting, given the time. And then I guess an update on the top 10 walk bike barrier project. That was something that we kind of kicked off at the last meeting, and we had asked everyone to send in their top 3 locations that, we were then going to discuss and try to prioritize to get it narrowed down to top 3. So you want to give us an update real quick on that?
Absolutely, yes. So thank you to everybody who sent in your suggestions. We have a total of 20 right now, and I'll send out the list that I compiled to you all tomorrow if I can. One thing that I'm going to look into is see how they overlap with the Vision Zero high entry network, because it would be good to see if they line up anywhere. But yeah, I think we should probably push the discussion around that to next meeting. Just want to keep you all out of it later.
And the plan for that would be to have them all mapped on, somewhere we, have them mapped in Google Earth or something, we can zoom to each one, and whoever proposed it can kind of talk and provide a little justification as far as why they thought that location was valid. And then we eventually said we want to do it where we, kind of have the locations it out in some way, and you can prioritize them some various stickers or something that we can pass out to people. So,
Yeah.
yeah, work on there. Cool.
All right, and then maybe we should just talk briefly about the workshop.
The VPAC July workshop planning, I mean, this is kind of news to me, but currently we're doing a workshop, so it's like that's what this paper's about, is that right, Ben?
Yes.
So what do we need to discuss about that?
Well, it's partially, it's up to you all, what we discussed at the workshop, and so I guess part of it's a question of city costs. I was thinking we might have the option of making the top 10 project main focus.
I guess real quick, do you know how many people have sent in their top 3 and how many we're still waiting for?
I think it was 8 or 9, so it would definitely be good to maybe do another round of submissions. And I'll send out an email to everyone who hasn't done it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Try to get as much participation as we can on that. So yeah, take this as your reminder, and same thing for those online. All right, and then anything else needs to be said about the workshop?
Not that I can think of. I think we can just add this to the agenda next week.
Is it going to be the same date? Is it going to be the 4th?
Yeah, let me check. It's the workshop is going to be the 26th. Yeah.
And where's it going to be?
I think it should be here. Let me check. Yes, 5:30.
Okay. So, because we've had it in different places in the past, but we're just going to have it here.
Let's see, the location is TBD, so I'll keep you all posted on that.
So the idea is to just, instead of have a normal meeting, we just do like a workshop meeting?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Last year, Tim, we met over at the upper Tampa Bay Trail. Was it last year, I think, and then people came early if they couldn't, they rode on the trail a little bit. The year before that.
We met at.
The Tri-County was the same day. That was the same.
Yeah.
That was our workshop. Then the year before, am I right, John?
Yeah.
And then the year before, we met down at Julian Lane.
Yeah.
And then we did a ride around the city with Wade, which was really interesting. Wade's been there a while. He knows things and places I'd never heard of. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think we should definitely do it somewhere where we can have access to computers, just that way we can kind of do that presentation time and we can get people really familiar with, where those locations that they are proposing. Because, if you just give like a street name, 2 street names, it just doesn't go for me as well. Like I can't just, snap there. I exactly know what you're talking about. So I think that would go a long way as far as getting everyone an understanding of context across things. And yeah, which ones we prioritize. So should we go ahead and have that be like the goal of the workshop meeting, to have all of them in, all of the proposed locations in, and then that's when we prioritize? That seems like the best time.
I think so.
Yeah.
The Germany Public Library has a pretty good sized computer lab. You might be able to check with them and get access for 20 workstations.
Yeah.
Which public library?
I
Everywhere.
don't think we need 20 workstations. I was thinking more of like a computer here where you can have screens and like, the person that knows the location, they can kind of go up and be like, hey, these are my locations. You can have them like preloaded onto like a KMZ.
So we can work off the FOU.
Yeah.
Okay.
And each kind of take a turn and say, this is why I think we should, put this on our list. Yeah, exactly.
VPAC show.
Yeah, kind of the VPAC show and tell. And then, we have some kind of system worked out as far as, maybe a list, you have a list of them. And then hand everyone, 5 stickers and be like, all right, but everyone pick 5 out of the 20. You're probably going to pick the 3 that you submitted yourself. Yeah, that's kind of my idea for All right, well, that's everything on here. Like I said, we'll do item C next month, and then we can go ahead and motion to adjourn.
Jim Short, I move we adjourn.
Second.
All right, let's call it adjourned.
Thank you. Gotta go home. Get some Korean kimchi stew.
I wanted to go ahead and work it this way.
Yeah, it was, part of Please talk.
Childhood friend.
I mean, if you can.
Yeah, and kids, and then the designation.
Yeah.